The hot summer sun hung low in the sky as Marvin Stokes, an elderly African-American man, slowly shuffled down the cracked sidewalk, his cane tapping the pavement with a steady rhythm. It had been a long day, one of many in recent weeks, but the weight of the day didn't seem to bother him. At 72, Marvin had learned to endure far worse than a simple day of walking to the corner store. His body was old, but his mind was sharper than most knew. He had served his country proudly. A soldier during the Vietnam War, he had seen the worst of humanity, the chaos and carnage of a faraway land. He had come home to a different kind of war, one fought on the streets of America. But this was not a story of loss or defeat. No, this was a story of triumph, of dignity, and of the power of kindness and justice. But on this day, as Marvin moved along the quiet street, the heavy, oppressive air seemed to grow thicker with every step. It was as if the world around him had suddenly sharpened. That's when it happened. Without warning, 2 police cars screeched to a halt beside him. The officers inside, men with faces full of authority and arrogance, stepped out quickly, blocking Marvin's path. "Hey, old man," one of the officers barked, his tone rough and dismissive. "What's an old vet like you doing on this street?" Marvin, ever the calm figure, adjusted his glasses and gave them a nod. "Not looking for trouble. Just heading to the store, officer. Nothing more." The officer's eyes narrowed. "You don't look like you belong here." Marvin's heart sank. He had heard these words before too many times in his life. It wasn't the first time he had been looked at with suspicion, but it was different now. It felt wrong, in a deeper, more personal way. "Let's see some ID," the officer demanded, his hand already resting on his baton. Marvin, knowing how the world worked, reached into his pocket, his hands trembling, ever so slightly, not from fear, but from a lifetime of frustration. But before he could present his ID, the officer yanked his arm roughly, pulling him toward the patrol car. "Hey," Marvin protested, his voice calm but firm. "You can't do this. I haven't done anything wrong." Another officer joined in, pushing him harder toward the car. "You don't tell us what to do, old man," he sneered. "You'll come with us, whether you like it or not." Marvin's heart raced, but he kept his composure. He had lived through worse, faced down more adversaries than these 2 officers. But this was different. This was the moment when the weight of decades of injustice bore down on him. The 2 officers shoved Marvin into the back of their squad car, slamming the door shut. The world outside seemed to disappear, replaced only by the hum of the engine and the sound of his own breathing. But as the car pulled away, something shifted. Something deep inside Marvin stirred. Minutes later, inside the police station, the officers had placed Marvin in a holding cell, still handcuffed, waiting for someone to explain what was happening. The cold, dimly lit room smelled of stale air, a far cry from the fresh breeze he was accustomed to. But Marvin wasn't focused on the smell or the uncomfortable chair. He was focused on one thought. How could this happen? Just as he began to question his faith in the world, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. The door to the holding cell creaked open, and in walked men dressed sharply in suits. FBI agents. The officers in the station froze, visibly tense. These weren't the kind of men you ignored. The lead agent, tall and broad-shouldered, glanced around the room before locking eyes with the officer who had been most aggressive with Marvin. "Excuse me, officer," the agent said, his voice even but filled with authority. "We're here to speak with Marvin Stokes." The officer stuttered, caught off guard. You can't just come in here, and I think you'll find we have the jurisdiction." The agent cut in, his eyes cold and unyielding. "You'll need to step aside." The other officer, realizing they had been caught, shifted uneasily. They both stepped back, allowing the agents to approach Marvin. The agents undid his cuffs, a silent acknowledgement of the injustice he had suffered. Marvin sat still, processing the events that had just unfolded. The anger that had simmered in him for so long suddenly began to rise, but he fought to keep it in check. He wasn't a young man anymore. His battles were not fought with fists or screams, but with the strength of his character. One of the agents, a younger man, smiled at Marvin. "We're sorry you had to go through that, sir. It's unacceptable." The other agent, his eyes filled with genuine concern, leaned in closer. "We've been monitoring this station for some time. Racial profiling, abuse of power. We've seen enough." Marvin's throat tightened. He had no words at first, no way to express the gratitude that swelled inside him. But then, after a long pause, he spoke softly. "I've been fighting this fight my whole life. Sometimes it feels like I'm losing, but moments like this remind me that justice still exists." The FBI agents led Marvin out of the station, their presence a shield against the prejudice that had tried to tear him down. As they stepped into the bright light of day, Marvin's heart felt lighter, his spirit renewed. For the first time in a long while, he felt the stirrings of hope. As the FBI agents escorted Marvin out, a small crowd of bystanders had gathered outside the station. They had seen the injustice, the humiliation. They had watched it unfold in real time on their phones, the images of a black veteran being mistreated by those sworn to protect him. But as the door opened, and Marvin emerged with the agents, Something shifted in the crowd. A young man in the crowd, no more than 25, stepped forward, holding out a small bouquet of flowers. "Thank you for your service," he said, his voice sincere. Eyes softened as he looked at the young man. It was a simple gesture, but in that moment, it was everything. Another woman, older but with the same fire in her eyes, reached out and placed a hand on Marvin's shoulder. "You're not alone," she whispered. "We see you, we hear you." Marvin didn't know what to say. He had lived through so much in his life, but the kindness of these strangers, these ordinary people who were willing to stand up for him in a moment of injustice, it shook him to his core. By the time Marvin reached his apartment, he was exhausted, but something had changed. The weight on his shoulders had lessened, the burden of injustice now shared by others, people who cared, people who were willing to take a stand. And in that, Marvin found a new strength. In the days that followed, the story of Marvin's arrest spread like wildfire. News outlets covered the incident, and the public's outrage was palpable. But what was even more powerful was the collective wave of support that followed. People from all walks of life, of every race and background, began to speak out against racism, against abuse of power, and for the values that should unite us all. Marvin's story became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is always a chance for change. It wasn't just the FBI agents or the young man with the flowers that made a difference. It was the collective will of the people, the kindness of strangers who refused to remain silent. And Marvin, he became more than just a veteran or a victim of injustice. He became a symbol of the resilience and power of the human spirit. Marvin's story is not just his own, it is the story of every person who has ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or dismissed. It is the story of every person who has faced adversity and found the strength to stand tall. And it is a reminder that kindness, justice, and solidarity can break even the strongest barriers. So, what can we learn from Marvin's journey? That no matter how hard life gets, there is always a chance for redemption. There is always someone willing to stand by your side, to support you in your darkest hour. If Marvin's story touched your heart, if you believe in the power of kindness and justice, then I ask you to do something today. Share your own story in the comments. Stand up for what's right, no matter the cost, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that inspire, uplift, and remind us all that together, we can make the world a better place.